The sound of footsteps on the street below felt like daggers piercing my soul. I had always had my grievances with my husband, but never to this extent. The way he could so easily destroy everything important to me. There was no coming back from that. Forgiving him was out of the question. I would make him regret ignoring me, my family, and his selfishness. My name is Jennifer, a 45-year-old housewife. I live in a small flat with my husband. Growing up, I was particularly close to my grandfather, a man I admired deeply. Even though my grandmother had passed, my grandfather remained strong and healthy for his age. We would meet occasionally, and his wisdom was something I cherished. A family must support each other no matter what. It's that support that makes us a family, he'd often say. Those words still echo in my heart. Family is about mutual care, not one-sided sacrifice. I wanted to live by his example, to build a life like his, but life had other plans. Before we got married, my husband seemed like a different man. He helped with chores and acted kind. But as soon as we started living together, he changed completely. I was left to do everything, cleaning, cooking, everything. Don't leave all the housework to me, I would plead with him time and again. His response was always the same. I'm tired from work. It's your job to handle the home. His dismissiveness turned our conversations into arguments. Why are you so selfish? I would ask, desperate for him to understand. But his answer was always the same. That's your role. You're useless as a wife if you can't even do that. The more he belittled me, the more I started to wonder if I was indeed the problem. But I couldn't shake my mother's words from my mind. Even as a stay-at-home wife, you're not supposed to do everything alone. A family works together. I tried to follow her advice, but nothing I said to my husband made any difference. Then the worst news arrived. My grandfather had collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. My mother called to tell me, and I knew I had to be with him. Can you handle things at home while I go visit Grandpa? I asked my husband. His response was as cold as ever. Why should you visit? You're the wife. Your place is at home. His words stung. Grandpa's seriously ill. I need to go, I insisted, but he shrugged it off. Who's going to take care of the house if you leave? I begged him to let me go, but he refused. I felt trapped, helpless. My mother tried to reassure me by taking care of everything, but my heart ached as Grandpa's condition worsened. I thought about visiting in secret, but I didn't have the means to get there. My husband had the car for work. Night after night, I lay awake, fearing I would never see my grandfather again. A month later, he passed away. I never got to say goodbye. At the funeral, seeing his face so frail and thin, I wept harder than anyone else. The sorrow of losing him consumed me, but it was soon followed by another blow, my growing indifference to my husband. Every day, I felt like a shell of myself, empty and disconnected. One day, out of the blue, my husband approached me. There's a place I want to take you. I need you to come with me, he said. For a brief moment, I hoped he was trying to make amends, that maybe he was finally willing to be the kind of partner my grandfather always spoke of. I followed him, clinging to that flicker of hope. We arrived in a quiet residential area. Nothing special about the place, no signs of change or reconciliation. We stopped in front of the house, and he pointed at it. What's this? I asked, confused. This, he said, is our new home. I stared at him in shock. A new home? Where did you get the money for this? He looked at me, completely unfazed. From your grandfather's inheritance. I know about it, even though you tried to hide it. With that much money, of course we can buy a house. I was speechless. I wasn't even allowed to visit my grandfather when he was dying, but my husband was ready to claim his inheritance. The betrayal felt like a knife in my heart. I couldn't comprehend how immoral and heartless his thinking was. He seemed to lack any trace of humanity. When I refused to give him the inheritance, he snapped back, "Your money is my money. Stop saying ridiculous things. Just hand over the money for the house." His selfishness brought tears to my eyes, and I noticed people passing by giving him cold stares as he laughed loudly, oblivious to their judgment. If I had known his true nature, I would have never married him. Why hadn't I seen it sooner? I felt a surge of anger. How could he trample on my feelings so easily? By this point, my love for him had completely vanished. You seem to misunderstand, I said, trying to stay calm. But I can't inherit my grandfather's estate. My words caught him off guard, and for a moment his face reflected surprise. But he quickly recovered, smirking as if mocking me. Don't lie just because you don't want to give me the money. I know your grandfather left it all to you. Yes, he did, I admitted. It was written in his will. but I renounced the inheritance. Even if I had accepted it, I wouldn't use his estate for you. I couldn't bear to see my grandfather's legacy wasted on someone like you. His face reddened with fury. What? You can't just give it up. Go and get it back right now. We won't be able to make the loan payments. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I won't hand over my grandfather's estate to someone who only cares about money. My words hit hard, and he lost his composure, shouting, Don't get smart with me. But his anger no longer had any power over me. His threats felt hollow, the desperate rantings of a man who had lost control. I thought back to my grandfather, and it only deepened my resolve. This man, who refused to let me visit my dying grandfather, had no right to the inheritance. Families are meant to support each other, but he showed no such care. He wasn't family anymore, and his fate was no longer my concern. What mattered most was honoring my grandfather's memory, and with that, I felt a sense of peace. What about the loan? My husband, realizing I wouldn't back down, looked panicked. I don't know, I replied coldly. Solve it yourself. Flustered, he fumbled for his phone. Hello, Mom, he said, his voice shaky. I soon saw my mother-in-law rushing toward us, her face full of confusion. What's going on? She asked, looking between the two of us. I calmly explained, your son bought a house without telling me and planned to use my grandfather's inheritance to pay for it. And despite my grandfather being on his deathbed, he refused to let me visit him. My mother-in-law's face turned red with anger as she processed what I said. She glanced at her son, who gave her a sheepish nod in confirmation. Why would you do that? She shouted, her voice full of fury. You didn't even let her see her grandfather, and now you want the inheritance. That's irresponsible. Before anyone could react, she slapped him hard across the face. My husband, clearly shocked by the sudden scolding, began to cry. I didn't mean it like that, he sobbed, his cries echoing down the quiet residential street. But his mother wasn't done. Apologize to Jennifer, she demanded, her voice sharp. You've acted like a terrible person. Mom, please don't scold me so much. I thought I was doing the right thing, he whimpered through his tears. Learn the difference between right and wrong, she replied sternly. What you did was completely wrong. I'm sorry, he muttered, his voice barely audible as he offered his apology. But it was too late. Any remorse from him meant nothing now. I'm sorry, my husband apologized again, but by then, I felt like a spectator in my own life. Watching everything unfold, a sense of relief washed over me. I truly am sorry, he repeated, and even my mother-in-law chimed in. Jennifer, please forgive us. My husband begged. Jennifer, help me, but when his mother shot him a harsh glare, he let out a sad, defeated sigh. Seeing a grown man cry like that was pitiful, and as I watched this absurd scene, I finally said what mattered most. Let's get a divorce. His face, already pale, turned ghostly white. But I apologized. There are things we can't fix with just an apology. Our values don't align, I continued. I wish I had realized it sooner. Don't say that. I'm nothing without you. My husband clung to my feet, desperate. What about the house? The mortgage? I can't do anything without you. That's not my problem anymore, I said coldly. I'm done with you, so give up. He looked devastated, but I had no intention of comforting him. No matter how much he pleaded, my mind was made up. My mother-in-law, seeing me shake my head, said firmly, if you want a divorce, go ahead. I'll deal with my foolish son. Yes, please, I replied. I never want to see him again. With that, she took him by the arm and led him back to her house. Even as he walked away, he kept shouting, "Help me, Jennifer." But my heart was frozen, unmoved by his cries. The divorce process was swift. My ex-husband resisted at first, but under pressure from his mother, he eventually agreed. Since the divorce was his fault, I was granted alimony for the emotional distress he caused me. He also had to take full responsibility for the mortgage, as the house was in his name. I knew he would struggle with both payments, but that wasn't my concern anymore. Time passed, and I ran into his mother one day. She told me that after the divorce and the crushing weight of the mortgage, my ex-husband stopped going to work. He missed so many days that his company eventually fired him. Now, he works part-time at a construction site, constantly scolded by his mother. She said he doesn't get along with his co-workers and complains daily about wanting to quit. But his mother won't allow it. As for me, I rebuilt my life. I found a new job that welcomed me despite my lack of recent experience. A kind mentor helped me learn the ropes, and I quickly adapted. Now, I'm even in charge of training new employees. My life now is far more fulfilling than during my marriage. I feel confident again, proud of who I've become. Soon, I plan to visit my grandfather's grave. I want to tell him everything that's happened, knowing he's watching over me with a smile from above. From now on, the four of us will live together, my son Ben says with a laugh as he walks in. Come on, let us in quickly and order something fancy for dinner, he jokes, making demands over the phone. It's a new chapter, and this time, I feel ready for whatever comes next. I was completely astounded by his selfishness. That's impossible. I'm still in the middle of sorting things out at the new house, I exclaimed, my frustration mounting. What new house? Ben's voice was filled with confusion. In the background, I could hear his wife, Kate, sounding furious. You can't always have things your way. My name is Nancy, a 56-year-old homemaker. I've been married to Ken for 30 years. We met at work and got engaged about a year after we started dating. I will always make you happy, so please marry me, he said sincerely, and those words meant the world to me. Even now, 30 years into our marriage, Ken still makes me happy. I'm truly glad to have married him. About a year after our wedding, I became pregnant. It was unexpected but a joyful surprise for both of us. We had always hoped for a child. We named our son Ben. He was an adorable baby, and we cherished him, raising him with all our love. As he grew older and started to speak, our days became even more joyful, filled with his laughter and innocent mischief. Time flew by, and soon Ben was ready to start elementary school. We hoped he would make many friends and excel in his studies. However, things didn't go as smoothly as we hoped. As soon as Ben started school, he began causing trouble. He was always lively and mischievous at home, but his behavior at school seemed out of control. He disrupted classes and made his classmates cry with his selfishness. Every time the school called, I found myself apologizing, and Ken and I would scold Ben, trying to make him understand why his actions were wrong. Unfortunately, he didn't see it that way and felt our scolding was unfair. Nothing seemed to change his behavior. Ben struggled with his studies, unable to concentrate, and his teachers often pointed out his poor grades. We worried about our parenting and tried everything from tutoring to private lessons, but his grades remained poor. In middle school, the issues continued. He frequently disrupted classes and once even injured another child, which led us to apologize to the child's family. Ben was clearly seen as a problematic student at school. Whenever I attended open house or parent-teacher conferences, I noticed that other parents avoided me, making it difficult to make friends. It was a tough time for our family. Despite these challenges, Ben managed to advance to high school. Ken and I hoped he would graduate successfully. We allowed Ben to take up a part-time job, but only on the condition that he continued to study diligently. He often spent his allowance too quickly, so we provided him with only a modest amount, hoping he would learn to manage his finances better. Earning his own money seemed to make him very happy, and he worked almost daily at his part-time job, earning a considerable sum for a high school student. Remarkably, he kept his promise and did not neglect his studies. He worked hard even in subjects he found challenging, and as a result, we no longer received any calls from his school about his behavior. Ken and I were amazed by this sudden change in Ben. However, despite his hard work, Ben spent all his earnings and had no savings. He bought numerous luxury items, and his wallets and bags were more expensive than mine, which shocked me. Eventually, Ben graduated from high school, an achievement that once seemed almost impossible. Moreover, he was offered a full-time position at the grocery store where he had worked part-time for 3 years. His securing a stable job was a great relief for us as his parents. When Ben got the job, he decided he wanted to move out to live independently and freely. Although I felt a pang of sadness at the thought of him leaving home, considering all the effort we had put into raising him, I also understood his desire to spread his wings and find his own path. I also recognized that Ben was now a grown man, and seeing him work hard was a good thing, or so I believed. After Ben moved out, he rarely returned home. We had hoped he would come back at least for Christmas, but he didn't. It was his first year living on his own, so maybe he wanted to enjoy the freedom, although it was disappointing. Ken and I didn't push him. We assumed that future holidays would just be the two of us. However, as time passed, there were still no signs of Ben returning. He didn't come home during the summer vacation or any other time, and there was no contact from him. Worried about his safety, we tried to reach out. After several attempts, he finally answered the phone. "What? You're being annoying. What do you want? Ben responded, clearly irritated. Ben, we were worried about you. You haven't come home or contacted us since you left, I said, feeling both relief and frustration. You're calling me repeatedly just for that. I'm fine, he replied dismissively. It's not just that. We were really worried. Can't you come home at least once a year? I pleaded. Fine, I get it. I'm hanging up now, Ben said and quickly ended the call. I wasn't sure if he didn't understand how much parents worry or if he was just being self-centered. Either way, I was relieved to know he was safe, even if it was a small comfort. After that, Ben rarely returned home and we nearly gave up hope of seeing him again. Then about 5 years after he had moved out, he suddenly appeared at our doorstep. Mom, Dad, it's been a while. Ben greeted us casually. Ben? You're here so suddenly. Is something wrong? I asked, surprised by his unexpected visit. Something wrong? Didn't Mom tell me to come back? He replied. That's true, but you could have at least informed us beforehand. Sorry, but you're happy to see me, right? He said, brushing off my concerns. Yes, of course. Have you been well? You haven't contacted us at all. Okay, Dad. No lectures, please. I'm fine. I came today because I have something important to tell you. Something important? I asked, feeling a sense of unease. Actually, I'm getting married, Ben announced, casually dropping the bombshell. Married? Ken and I were shocked. Yeah, relax. I'll bring my fiancée next week. You can meet her, Ben said nonchalantly. Of course, but getting married so soon. You're only 23, Ben, I said, still trying to process the news. People get married at this age all the time, he responded confidently. As if his sudden visit wasn't surprising enough, this news left us completely stunned. A week later, Ben returned with his fiancée Kate. She was 21, 2 years younger than Ben, and she fit the image of a modern young woman, flashy and confident. They had met at the grocery store where Ben worked and decided to get married. Are you sure you want to get married so young? I asked, feeling concerned. Well, actually, Kate began, her voice softening. I'm pregnant. That's why we need to get married. Pregnant? I blurted out, caught off guard by yet another revelation. Didn't I mention it? Ben asked, clearly having forgotten to tell us about this important detail. We hadn't heard anything about it, Ken said, looking as shocked as I was. So, you're getting married because of the pregnancy? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around everything. Exactly. We want to have the wedding before Kate's belly becomes noticeable, Ben explained. The conversation moved quickly, and we struggled to keep up. Then Ben made a request that floored us even more. Actually, we need to pay a deposit for the wedding venue soon, and we're a bit short. Can you guys cover it? What? Ken and I were speechless. After all the shocking news, now he was asking for financial help. We can't just come up with money like that on such short notice, I said, trying to remain calm. Well, we're in trouble too. We've already invited friends to the wedding, Ben said, visibly upset. That's putting the cart before the horse, Ken said, frustrated. Ben and Kate looked hurt. I didn't think my parents would be so heartless. You're okay with us being sad because we can't have our wedding? Ben said, his voice laced with disappointment. That's not what we mean, Ben, I said softly. Then as parents, shouldn't you at least cover the wedding expenses? Ben asked, his frustration growing. Though it felt unreasonable, we didn't want to ruin their important day. Reluctantly, we agreed to prepay the wedding expenses, draining $113,000 from our savings. It was exhausting, both mentally and physically, but seeing Ben and Kate happy made us accept the situation. The meeting with both families went well, and Ben's wedding was a beautiful ceremony. We were relieved it had gone smoothly. After Kate gave birth, however, a new problem arose. The couple wouldn't let us see our grandchild Mike. When we tried to visit the hospital, Ben told us Kate was too tired and needed rest. That seemed reasonable, so we waited. Months passed, and still, Ben didn't initiate contact. Every time we reached out, we were told it wasn't a good time to meet Mike. We felt uncomfortable with how distant Ben and Kate had become, but they didn't forget to remind us about the birth celebration gift. They never visited, and their home address remained a mystery to us. It wasn't until a year later, during the Christmas holidays, that we finally met Mike. They visited briefly, just for a short talk at the front door, and we got to hold Mike only once. During that brief interaction, they demanded $200 for a Christmas gift. Afterward, as expected, Ben and his family disappeared again. 4 years passed quickly. One day, Ben and Kate suddenly visited our house again. To our surprise, they had another child, now 3 years old, and their older son, Mike, was already 5. He had grown so much that we might not have recognized him on the street. "Why are you here today?" Ken asked, sensing that something was off. I couldn't truly rejoice at seeing our grandchildren's faces after all these years, especially since Ben and Kate had shown up unannounced. After cutting ties with us for so long, I was suspicious of their sudden reappearance. My instincts told me this wasn't good news. Then Ben dropped the bombshell. "We're planning to move in here," Ben announced as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Are you serious? You mean live together?" I asked, trying to process the shock. "Yes, I thought Mom and Dad would be happy. You can be with your grandchildren and me every day," Ben said, clearly believing we'd welcome them with open arms. "But why all of a sudden?" I pressed. "Well, we won't have to pay rent, and you two can help with the kids," Ben replied, proudly revealing his motive. It hit me then. After not seeing our grandchildren for 4 years, they now wanted to move in for free childcare and rent. I wasn't having it. "It's the same whether we see them now or not," I said, feeling a growing sense of frustration. Ken nodded in agreement. "Exactly. We've been ignored for years, and now we're only good enough when you need something." Ben was furious. "What are you saying? I'm offering to live together. I was even thinking about taking care of you in the future. Anyway, moving in is a done deal." With that, he stormed out with his family, leaving us stunned. We had raised our son, and part of me felt responsible for how he turned out, but Ben was an adult now. He had his own family, and it wasn't our job to step in anymore. Ken and I firmly decided that we would not live with them. However, Ben and Kate were clearly serious about moving in. A few days later, boxes began arriving at our house, sent by Ben. It seemed they were planning to move in by force. Though the boxes were here, Ben and his family weren't yet. They were likely planning to show up later. Ken and I acted quickly. We changed the locks on the house and called a moving company. Luckily, we owned a condo that we'd bought as an investment, and we decided to move there instead. The movers were available the next morning, so we arranged everything swiftly. We transported some of our things ourselves, while the larger items were handled by professionals. We even contacted a real estate agent to start the process of selling the house. We weren't about to let Ben and Kate bulldoze their way into our lives. The next morning, the movers completed the job, and by the time Ben and his family arrived, we were gone. We had managed to avoid their plans just in time. Later that afternoon, Ben called. "Hey, is something wrong?" "No, the question is, what's going on with you?" I replied calmly. Ben half laughed. "We're coming over today. The 4 of us will be moving in." Without waiting for a response, he hung up. Ken and I were concerned. We continued unpacking in our new home. An hour later, Ben called again, sounding confused. "What's going on? Our boxes are outside, the key doesn't work, and I've been ringing the doorbell. Let us in and get dinner ready or order something fancy for delivery." His entitled demands astounded me. "It's impossible," I replied. "We're unpacking at our new house." "New house?" Ben asked, bewildered. "That's right. We decided not to live with you. You sent your belongings without our consent, so we moved to avoid you." "You moved? You couldn't have found a place so quickly. We already had another property. If we had told you, you would have insisted on living together. We had our own emergency plan." Ben fell silent for a moment. I could hear Kate shouting in the background. "That house is already sold, so it's pointless to try and live there," I added. Ben sounded utterly defeated. "You always get your way," he muttered before hanging up. Without hesitation, I blocked his number. Unfortunately, our warnings didn't seem to reach Ben. In a shocking move, he and his family broke a window to enter the house, moving in their belongings as if it were theirs. Naturally, we reported them to the real estate agency, and they were promptly arrested. During the arrest, Ben resisted, shouting, "This is my childhood home. What's wrong with staying here?" The police subdued him, and the entire incident was witnessed by neighbors and passers-by. Some even recorded the scene and posted it on social media, spreading the news far and wide. As a result, Ben was fired from his job the very next day. His reputation was ruined, and following his arrest, his life unraveled. I later heard that he and Kate divorced. She took their children and moved back to her parents' home, where she now works full-time. Her parents, furious about the situation, manage her salary to save for the children's education. As for Ben, I don't know what he's doing now. And frankly, I no longer care. Ken and I believe we've done enough for him. From now on, we're focused on living happily together, just the two of us.